Now, the only reason you'd want to watch this fine piece of literary mastery would be because you have the burning desire to see and understand the finer points of the TeraFlex dual-rate ST Swaybar, and to see and understand the ease with which it can be installed and enjoyed. Let's do this. Remove the front bumper. First, start by trying to remove those painfully plastic little retainer clips from the front valence. Ours would not turn. They stripped out the head of the plastic screw. In a fit of rage, we drilled them out. Now, the lower air dam retainers on the newer Jeeps have a simple pop-out center, and then the retainer can be removed as an assembly. Disconnect the driving light harness at the bulb, and then pop loose all the harness retainers. Make sure all the wiring is free from the bumper. Slide the bumper valence to one side to access 4 of the 8 bumper bolts. Use an 18mm socket and remove the nuts. Slide the valence to the other side and remove the remaining 4 nuts. With all the nuts loose, you'll probably hear the 4 bumper washer plates hit the ground. Just gather them up. And you can get ready to be impressed by the sheer magnitude of the bumper's weight. Let's start with the Swaybar links. Use an 18mm impact to really speed up the process. If you're doing this by hand, you'll probably need to hold that stud from turning with a 3/4 inch end wrench. Remove the 4 Swaybar bushing mount bolts. Use a 15mm. But hang on to it. Don't let that bar hit you in the lip. Use a square and measure down 4 5/8 of an inch. And mark for the cut. There are a couple of ways you can do this. Cut off the bracket and leave the welded pieces, or cut at the welds so that it's a little cleaner looking when you're finished. It's all completely covered by the bumper, so it's not really a big deal either way. We cut at the welds. Be very careful not to nick the wiring harnesses or cooler lines. Wear safety glasses, earplugs, gloves, and keep your lips closed. An air chisel really speeds up the process of knocking the brackets loose from the frame. By prying the cut piece, you could get lucky and break loose the remaining weld on the back side. If not, you're going to have to do a little careful grinding. On the 2012 and newer crowd, we'll need to remove the vacuum pump bracket. Instead of cutting all along the welds this time, we just cut vertically and left the welded tabs from the bracket. Again, you could cut along all the welds if you'd like, but it's really not going to be necessary. The air hammer really speeds up this process. When one side of the bracket is free, it will work loose and can be removed. Do the same drill on the other side, but beware of harnesses and cooler lines. Cut, pry, remove the bracket. The new Swaybar bushing retainer bracket will need to be correctly oriented left and right. Look at the hole alignment. They're a little bit offset. Just by lying the bracket next to the final resting place, we can see that the holes would line up when the bracket is installed. Get this right the first time. It's a real pain to get those brackets out, especially on these newer Jeeps. You may need to tap the bracket into place. They're a little tight to get them in there. With the bracket in position, loosely install the 3 mounting bolts on each bracket. You'll notice that it's a little tight on the inside of the bracket when it comes to starting the nuts. Use a 7/8 open end wrench and tape the nut to the wrench. Start with the lower bolt and just carefully start the nuts. This actually works pretty well. Now we aren't going to tighten the bolts on either side until we get that torsion bar into place and everything is aligned. Grease up the inside of the bushings, as well as the inner and outside of the torsion bar itself. Orient the bushing with the flat on top and push or tap it into place. Now the larger torsion bar has a bushing pressed into it. That bushing should be oriented to the passenger or right side of the Jeep. Use your face and install the torsion bar so that the splines are fully exposed on the left or driver's side. Slide the spacer collar on and tighten it up. We'll final adjust the spacer later. We're just going to use it to help us with the install of the swaybar arm. Slide the arm onto the main torsion bar and install the smaller trail right bar. It'll only go in one way. Align the slot in the spacer with the slot in the arm. This needs to be tight, so we're running an interference fit between the splines. You'll probably need to spread the swaybar arm a little to get that spline spacer to go into the arm. Use a chisel and just tap it into the slot in the arm a little bit until it spreads just enough to allow that shaft to pass into the arm. Tap it in until it's almost flush with the arm. We'll finally adjust this later. Move to the opposite side and orient and install that shorter engagement arm just so that it's parallel with the arm that you just installed. Grab the remaining arm and once again use that chisel to spread the splines just enough to allow that arm to be able to be installed on that smaller shaft. The arms should be oriented so that they are completely parallel and so that the actuator holes are in alignment. If you'd like, you can throw in that disconnect knob to just double check for alignment. If needed, a dead blow can be used to drive the trail bar into the arm. Double check your arm adjustment and install the end bolts and washers. Use Loctite on the end shaft bolt. They've been known to work loose if you don't. The washer slot and the trail bar slot need to be indexed. There's a slot machined into the washer as well as into that smaller trail bar shaft. Use a 9/16 and tighten it up, 21 foot-pounds. Final position the entire dual rate bar. Now we have a pretty big gap between the swaybar arm and that outer cap washer. Loosen the clamping collar and tap the assembly until it's almost flush. Tap on the shaft until there is an even washer spacing on both sides. The clamping collar will be used to adjust that lateral play in the assembly. I usually cheat it to the driver's side just a little bit to gain a little more arm clearance on that passenger side. It's okay if the assembly floats from side to side a little bit. With the adjustment finalized, tighten the collar. Tighten the bushing bracket bolts. Use a 3/4 inch socket. If necessary, you can use a screwdriver to bind the nut just to keep it from turning. And then tighten the Swaybar clamping bolts. Move back and forth between the bolts and continue to gradually tighten them. They need to be tight, in fact 50 foot-pounds tight. Last up, let's assemble the adjustable Swaybar links. The left-hand threaded ends have a small notch in them. You can install the bushings in a vise, or a dead blow hammer works much quicker. With one side of the sleeve installed, just flip the joint over. The second bushing could be a bit of a challenge, unless you use the bolt as an install tool, just to keep things lined up as shown. The upper arm bolt is fine threaded and a little shorter. You will also use a lock washer between the bolt head and the larger washer. The washers and bolts are oriented so that there's a washer between the head of the bolt and the bushing. Loctite is big time important on this bolt. You do not want it to come loose. Install the links with the grease fittings facing out. Duh. There are 4 link mounting bolts on the arms themselves. By mounting the link inboard on the arms, the swaybar resistance is increased. 95% of the time, the outermost hole on the arm is used. That's a pretty big torsion bar and it doesn't need much help. In fact, I highly recommend using that disconnect feature of the SD swaybar when on the trail. Your comfort level will be increased, and you'll be able to enjoy the flex of your lift a lot more. With both links installed, use the adjusting sleeve to align the 2 arms on the passenger side. Once the holes in the arms are lined up, you should be able to easily install the swaybar knob. If you're having trouble installing the knob, just carefully grip the threads and twist the engagement knob until that locking pin is retracted. That'll make it a lot easier to install. Use some Loctite and an 1.5-inch end wrench or an adjustable open end wrench to tighten that street and trail bar knob. Make it tight. Throw on the sticker and grease the link bushings. And grease the links. Reinstall the bumper and go rally some hard turns. You will love the way your Jeep handles.